Welcome. I'm Bill Carmody, and I'm the Marketing Whisperer. Today on the program, we have Cynthia Covey Haller. And hello, Cynthia. How are you doing today?
Really good. Thanks, Bill. Sure appreciate you having me on today.
I'm so happy that you're here. So you have this really impressive bio, and so I'm going to read it off because I think it's really great that everyone get a big background about who you are and what you're about. So Cynthia Covey Haller is an author, teacher, speaker, and an active participant in her community. She has contributed to the writing of several books and articles, notably The Third Alternative by Stephen R. Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, and The 6 Most Important Decisions You'll Ever Make, both by Sean Covey. Cynthia has held multiple leadership positions in women's organizations, served as a PTSA president, and organizer for refugee aid and food pantry volunteer. She is currently working with her husband, Cameron, as a service volunteer, helping with employment needs. She graduated from Brigham Young University and lives with her family in Salt Lake City, Utah. Okay, that's a lot. You do a lot for a lot of people. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate you being here on the program.
I appreciate it. I guess they didn't mention that I do have 6 kids and 21 grandchildren, which gives me many chances to live in Crescendo.
Wow, 21 grandchildren. That's amazing. Yes. So and thank you for the context. So the purpose for us today is your new book, which I love. You authored this in partnership with your father, Stephen R. Covey, and it's literally his own last work. And it's I'm so excited to have you here today to talk a little bit about it.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm excited to share it because it was my father's mission statement the last 10 years of his life, and something that he really wanted to get out. And I was happy. After he passed away, we started working on it together, and I interviewed him, and he wanted me to do the stories and kind of make it come alive to people so they could be inspired by seeing other people that live in Crescendo. And then unfortunately, he passed away much earlier than we ever thought. And so it's been hanging over my head for 10 years. I've got to finish this book for him and get this great last message out. And so I think he's happy about it.
Yeah, well, so maybe we'll start there. What inspired you to co-author and publish this final work, since it has been about a decade since your father's passing?
Yeah, it's been 10 years in July. And it goes back to a conversation that he and I had years ago when I, without meaning to, insulted him and said, hey, Dad, are you going to ever write anything as big as 7 Habits? You're going to ever write anything that, successful? And he's like, what are you talking about? He said, am I just one and done? Do I have all my best ideas in the 7 Habits? I've got many ideas ahead, projects and book ideas got 10 ideas in my head. I still have important things to contribute. My best work is yet to come. And he didn't really say that to overvalue himself or to boast or anything, but he truly believed. And I'm thinking, why shouldn't all of us? That his best work and his best contribution was still ahead of him. So he was saying, why do I get up in the morning and pretend to write and then go to pretend to speak and teach principles when I've already done it all? And so so he kind of assigned me. He said, speaking of that, I've got so many different projects. Why don't you take the one you're passionate about, which was Live Life in Crescendo, and why don't you just interview me and you write the book with my ideas, and we'll kind of collaborate and get this out. And so we did that for a few years, and I had a lot of kids and I had other involvement in the community, and I didn't get it done, sadly, by the time he passed. And so this has been, my hope is to be his faithful translator of the vision he had of living in Crescendo. And that's been my goal, to get it out. And Simon & Schuster, I talked to them about, you published his first book, 7 Habits. You took a chance on an unknown author, and you published his first one, and now publish his last. And so I'm thrilled that they decided to do that.
I love that. I love that. Well, and my entire family is musical. My mom is an elementary music educator. She's retired now. My dad was a Ph.D. in music education, and both my brothers also a Ph.D. in music education, and they're both teaching at the college level. So I loved all the analogies of music applied to our life. Can you share what it means to live life in Crescendo?
And it's funny that my dad chose that as a mission statement, because our family is not musical. my mom had a beautiful sopranic voice, and she really could sing. My dad would sometimes call on her in speeches to sing, unaccompanied, and she could stand up and do that. But the rest of us were not too musical, although we all took lessons in different things. But if you think of the crescendo symbol, if you look at it, it's, and I know people aren't watching on the screen, but it begins with a point, and then it extends out in lines that don't meet again. And a crescendo, as you know, because you are musical, is it grows in energy, in volume, in influence, in power, and it keeps increasing. And the very opposite is diminuendo. And that's the opposite sign that starts out big and large, and then it slows. It comes to it halts. It comes to a stop. It completely ends at one point. And so the idea of this musical symbol is that we consciously need to choose when we're approaching different points in our lives. How am I going to choose to react to what's happened to me, to my circumstance, to what life deals me, to the ups and downs in the different ages and stages of life? Am I going to choose a crescendo mentality and believe that my best work is still to come, that I shouldn't look in the rearview mirror? He's always talking about, if you're driving a car and if you're looking over your shoulder or you're looking in your rearview mirror, you're going to end up in a ditch. So don't look back at your past failures or successes. Look at what's coming at you. Look ahead and choose to live in crescendo rather than diminuendo.
That's so beautiful. And Cynthia, what I love about that is that this idea that no matter what has happened, you don't anchor yourself into the past. And instead it's like looking out in front, like what can I continuously do and grow and expand? And that sort of that continuation that you're talking about, it just goes in all directions, and it just is ever expansive. So I think that's such a beautiful analogy to use for someone's life.
I loved it. And it meant a lot to him. I think that he thought it up because people were asking him at about my age. I'm 65. I usually don't say my age, but I'm 65, and I had to live in crescendo to finish the book.
That's so good.
I had 10 years of struggle and setbacks, and times I'm sitting there at the computer at 2 a.m. thinking, what am I doing? Am I going to find a publisher? Is this even good? Am I going to get this out? I felt a mission about it, and kind of to fulfill my dad's vision of this great principle. And so he was asked a lot when he was getting into his mid 60s and 70s, like, oh, Steve, are you about to hang it up? I mean, you're 70 years old, you're still out on the road and going hard. And he just thought, why wouldn't I? I have passion for my work. I believe in it. I'm teaching these true principles. I'm hopefully inspiring and helping people. And I have more to contribute. I'm not going to retire in our house. The R word was a bad word in our home. We didn't say retire. And so he always believed that we have great things to accomplish and to contribute ahead. And that's basically, one of the reason he decided to go with this mission statement.
So Cynthia, I want to just take this moment and thank you for all of the effort to get it out, because I'm telling you, like from the bottom of my heart, this was a phenomenal book. I love Life in Crescendo, and I think it's exactly what we need, both in terms of those who are experiencing setbacks in their life and looking at what is life really all about, and also for people who are thinking about retirement and saying like that R word you're talking about, that there are people out there that are like, I don't know, I don't want to give it up, right? And so this idea of like your life doesn't have to end just because you may change your profession, you change your focus. And so we'll get into that, and I'm excited to talk to you about that as well. But before we do, I love that you also sprinkle pearls of wisdom throughout the entire book with other really profound insights from the masters. And so one of my favorite ones was from Pablo Picasso, who says the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. I love that. And you said that you go on to share that this could be the mission statement for the book. Would you please share why that is?
It's inspiring to me too. The meaning of life is to find your gift. So my father taught that we all have unique missions, that life is a mission, not a career. and that you may define yourself by, I'm a doctor, I'm an author, I'm a podcast host, I'm a mechanic, or I'm a mother, father. Those are important roles, but when that job is finished, when your career is finished or ending, who are you? Your life is a mission. And he loved Viktor Frankl, who taught that we detect our missions. We don't invent them. We detect them within ourselves. And so that caused some introspection of that, using your conscience. We all have things that we know we should do, that we feel strongly about when we see poverty, or we see a need in our family or in our community, or we see something that you think, that means something to me. I should act on that. I should respond. So the first part, meaning of life, is to find your gift. We need to find why am I here? What is my purpose in life? And what is my unique mission, by detecting it within. And second, and then the purpose of life is to give it away, is that now that you find it, find your voice and help others find theirs. The eighth habit, my dad's eighth habit, the opportunity that we have, that life is about contribution, not accumulation. And that everything that we have, our skills, our special talents, you think you have to be wealthy, you have to be well-known, have a huge circle of influence, think we have to really be smart, do all these things to make a difference. Just mentor you're a teacher, mentor a struggling child in your class, believe in them. Cross the street and help your neighbor whose lawn is yellowing and looks awful, and they're lonely and they can't do the work themselves. See yourself as an instrument for good in the community that you live in. One friend of mine had breast cancer, and after she beat it, she would find other people that had breast cancer, and she'd go and meet with them. She'd make an appointment with them and say, look, I had it 5 years ago. Look at me. I'm here. I'm alive. Here's what you can do. And give her hope. Give the person hope that, you can overcome this. And so, I love that quote too. I think it's the mission statement of the book, because ultimately this book is about contribution and service to others. And that's where we find our true meaning and happiness in this life.
You mentioned, and I really appreciate that last part of what you're just sharing, that you and your father both say that the life is about contribution, not accumulation. So how does contribution help ensure that you live a life in Crescendo?
Well, you think about the deposits that are made into other people's lives. If you think to yourself, if we're talking about somebody who believed in you when nobody else did. If you ask a group in a room, how many of you were felt affirmed or believed in by someone when you didn't believe in yourself? And that's how he defined true leadership, is communicating another's worth and potential so clearly that they come to see it in themselves. So there's so many ways you can make contributions into others' lives. And you look around at people that I'm just thinking about someone like President Jimmy Carter, who I talk about the pinnacle of success in life. He's the president of the United States. You'd think that's the highest job in the land that you could have. Yet he didn't get reelected. How disappointing and humiliating, and what a hard thing he faced to go back without a second term. And so what would he do? He has a choice to live in Crescendo or diminuendo. He could retire to Georgia and eat his peanuts the rest of his life and not contribute, write his memoir, put up a library. But what does he do instead? History has judged him as being a fair, decent president, but not one of our greatest ones. But his post-presidency is the greatest of all of our presidents, because he went into the Carter Center for Peace. He's the face of Habitat for Humanity. He himself and Rosalind in their 90s, he has cancer now and is slowing down, but up until last year, he's out there building with a hammer with Rosalind, and they're building homes for people that have never had a decent place to live. His contributions were just beginning. clearly his most important work was ahead of him. And you would have thought, how could that be when he was the president of the United States? But he will go down in history as the best post-president we've had, where his presidency wasn't as stellar as his contributions that he made in humanitarian work. So contribution is living outside yourself, working for a common good for others, that ultimately helps you in your life, shapes you up, and helps you find meaning and purpose, but is a domino effect in the lives of others, blesses them immeasurably.
Yeah, I so appreciate that you define success differently than what our society refers to around wealth and position and prominence in a career. So would you care to make a little more of that distinction here?
Yeah. We talk about, so there's different sections in the book. This one's the midlife section, which could be stagnant, could be people wake up and they're 50 years old and they say, gosh, I thought that I would be this by this age. I thought I'd be wealthy. I thought I'd be more prominent. I thought I would have done more. I would have contributed and I'm not in the place I wanted to be. So some people may have a midlife crisis, and sometimes people flip out and do crazy things and leave their families or buy flashy cars, or, they just break down. So they're starting to live in diminuendo. And so, but society defines success and how you were saying, in prominence, in wealth, in fame, in notoriety. And that's what my father called secondary greatness. Primary greatness are character qualities of integrity and virtue and being faithful in a marriage and contribution. And so society would say, this is how we measure things, but he's defining it here as maybe you're more successful than you think you are. Think of George Bailey. I use that example of It's a Wonderful Life, which everyone knows and loves. And he thought he was a failure. He wanted to travel. He wanted to build buildings. He wanted to get out of Bedford Falls, which he thought was just a dumpy town. It was holding him back. He wanted all these dreams. And every time he tried to go, something came up and he had to stay and help people. He helped them get loans. He saved, his father dies and he has to take over the savings and loan because Potter is going to, corrupt the town. And so, he gets into a crisis and he wishes, I wish I hadn't have even lived. And the angel gives him his wish, that, okay, here's the town without you. And he sees, as the angel points out to him, he says, every man's life touches another. Every person's is an influence. And when you're gone, it leaves an awful big hole, doesn't it? You really have a wonderful life. And he realizes, I had all the most important things. I had my family. I've helped my friends have decent places to live. He had friendships. He had all this. He was the richest, as his brother said, you're the richest man in town. And he ultimately realizes that. But this idea of success we're defining as being successful in your most important roles. What are your most important roles in life? Is it that you're the best contractor in the city? Is it that you have a lot of money and influence? Or some of your most important roles may be that you are a grandfather to a struggling teenager, that you are a brother or sister to a sibling that is despairing or just got divorced. Or some of our most important roles are family roles, as well as, we have to wear lots of different hats. You have to provide for your family. You have to do all those other things. But he's defining success as being successful in your most important roles. And secondly, if you find yourself, you're stagnant and you're in a rut and I'm 50 years old and I'm not successful, I hate my job, I don't feel like I'm contributing, I haven't made a difference, then use your, what he calls resourcefulness and initiative, your R&I, and make it happen. I'm thinking about a man that who's a principal who weighed 400 pounds, Ernie Nix, could barely walk down the hall of his school. He had a great vision for this underprivileged school of where he wanted to take it, but yet he couldn't even go down to the end of the hall, and his doctor said he was years away from an untimely death. And so he thought to himself, if I want to take the school where I know it can go, I have to work on myself. I've got to get out of this stagnant rut. And I'm actually living in diminuendo. And he took control of that and lost weight. It took him a year and a half, lost 150 pounds, started running marathons, got control of his school. It caused his staff to get healthy. They all lost weight. They all got in shape. And one of his greatest moments, he tells, is being in the halls and having this school run so much more efficiently. And one of his students who had been gone and hadn't seen him for a year, ran into him and said, "Mr. Nix, dude, like, what happened to you? What did you do?" And he decided, here's an example of someone who did need to change. Sometimes you're not successful because you haven't taken control of your life. You may have to reinvent yourself, go into a different career. So take a hard look and do it. It takes hard work and effort, but look at the rewards that you can have if you want to be successful in your most successful roles, and if you also take control of your life and change its course if needed.
There's a couple of things there that I really want to highlight that I love that you just shared. But number one is how we define success, because that's one of the things that is often misunderstood. Just like the George Bailey example you gave, most people are thinking about success in their bank accounts. Most people are thinking about success in real estate purchasing and all the other power. And yet, as you mentioned, success comes in all kinds of forms. And what's the most important relationships you have? And what are the things that are most important to you? And really, are you elevating the things that matter most? Because you have the opposite effect. You have some people who are hugely financially successful and are miserable because they've neglected their families and they've neglected their kids, and they're not in their place where they really want to be too. Right. That's not the end of their story either, right? They can turn that around, just as you're saying, that life in Crescendo means, hey, you recognize it, do something about it, change.
Right. There's a story in here about, this is a different Covey book than others, because it does. My father wanted practical examples from famous, well-known, and not well-known people, ordinary people and more prominent people, so that everybody could see themselves in them. Yeah. For two reasons: to learn life lessons of Crescendo from these inspiring people, and second, to see yourself and think, I could do that. I can help like that. Or I've got this talent, and I don't have the wealth of a Bill and Melinda Gates, but I sure can volunteer at the food bank, and I can start a fundraiser, and I can do this in my circle of influence. And so anyway, I'm forgetting what we were talking about.
No. It's funny. Where you're going is, I'd love to keep going with it, which is the story of the mom. I think the one you're going into, who basically adopted, but basically brought someone into her family who was basically not very well liked in her school.
Right. This was a woman who they had kind of reached the pinnacle of success. They were in a small town. Her husband's a prominent doctor. It's kind of a poor town. And he's a dentist. And, he would have silent clinics and things, he and this other dentist, for the town, because they were struggling and poor. And so she's volunteering in the school, in this Title I school. And she sees a girl that nobody likes, that has a strong personality, is offensive. And she wants to get to the bottom of it and talks to the principal. And the principal says, you don't want anything to do with them. Her father's in prison. Her mother took off. She's gone, and they're kind of a bad family. You steer clear of them. They lie and cheat. You don't want to get to know them. She was the kind of person, she had primary greatness, she had character, and she thought, no, that's exactly who I want to get to know and mentor. And so she brought this girl, we call her Maria. She got to know her. She invited her over to her home with her children, and she was doing really poorly in school. And so when she would do homework with her kids, this girl she'd do homework with them after school. She didn't have a mother at home. She would give after school snacks. And the favorite thing for this girl to do was just to sit next to her on the couch, where she'd read to her. And she said to her at one point, "Can you just pretend to be my mother?" It's just so touching. She didn't have that. She just craved love and attention. And so here, this woman, who you would say would be one of the more prominent ones in her community, with a wealthy husband, who is caring about this underprivileged girl that doesn't have a good home life. And her father didn't speak English and he was doing the best he could, working 2 or 3 jobs. with a couple of girls. And so she kind of adopted her into her home, and they would come over after school. And then she brought the father over and would show the father that it's important to go to your daughter's activities at school. If you don't go, you're the only parent not there. And so she'd give them a ride, and they'd go together. They're able to do like a meet the author type thing. The year before, this girl's humiliated. She doesn't have a costume. She has a dumb little poster. She made sure that didn't happen the second year. And so little by little, this Maria just blossoms, and she just needed love and attention and a mentor. And what a blessing, she was to her life, and how she changed the trajectory of a life in diminuendo to crescendo by the love and attention she gave. That's contribution. If that's not success, compared to prominence and wealth, I don't know what is.
Well, and think of the ripple effect, right? What I love about that story is it's not just that this one girl has had her life turned around at a very young age, but all the people she'll impact, and then connections that she's received, and the love that she's received, that echo chambers out, so that everybody else that she's now in touch with used to be in conflict with and angry, and now suddenly there's this love connection that's a lot more authentic because she feels love.
But it's a domino effect, Bill. It's true. It's ripples in a pond. You throw a rock into it, and it starts out small, and then it just grows. Pretty soon it's filled that whole area with the ripples. And that's what contribution and service can do. And like I said, it's a double blessing, because you're blessing other people's lives. But think of what the joy that this mother got, seeing this girl and her sister become normal citizens and feel included, and their grades shot up. And like you say, other people treat them differently, and then they go on to influence other people. It's incredible.
So Cynthia, let's switch the conversation for a moment. Let's talk about setbacks. You and your father share that the main source of personal change is pain. Setbacks lead to pain, which can point to one of two roads: anger or humility. Say a little bit more about this.
Okay. Learning about some of these inspiring examples of setbacks was one of my most joyful and inspiring things that I did. I wanted to share a story about Ray Hinton. If you read the book, you'll remember. It's one of my favorite stories, because it shows about either choosing and making the choice of living in crescendo or diminuendo. So here's a man in the late 80s who is accused, basically framed, of 2 murders he did not commit. He's in a lockdown facility 15 minutes away from this crime, but because they didn't have anyone to pin it on, in this racially charged community, he was framed for this murder and went to prison. Well, he knows he's innocent, so he trusts, he's a good person too, and he trusts, justice will prevail. And he doesn't have money to hire a good lawyer, and it didn't turn out well for him. And he finds himself literally on death row, convicted of 2 murders, and is just floored by what happened. He's devastated, and he is in despair. He throws his Bible under the bed in his cell and decides to shut down. He's living in diminuendo. He chooses, okay, they don't care about me, I don't care about anyone. And he shuts down. Besides his family and friends who would visit him every week, he didn't speak to anyone, the guards, his fellow prison mates, anyone, for 3 years. 3 years of darkness and misery and hate, and feeling so despondent that he couldn't pull himself out of it. So he's in this state, and late at night, one night, he hears his cellmate next to him crying out in so much pain for help, for somebody to please help him. And it awakens in Ray compassion that he already had. It brings it back. And he thinks to himself, he's rocked by this. He said, I don't have a choice if I'm on death row, but I do have other choices. Hate is a choice, despair is a choice, but hope is a choice, and so is compassion and love. And he breaks that that 3-year silence and comforts this person he doesn't know from anywhere, and finds out that this man's mother just passed away. He just got word, and here he's on death row, and he heard his mother died, and he's devastated. He spends the night talking with him, comforting him, and listening to stories, and they're laughing and talking about his mother and what he meant to this prisoner. From then on, he becomes a beacon of light and hope to his cellmates, to the guards who even come to him for advice and talk with him. He starts a book club in prison to help liberate their minds to go in other places instead of this dark cell that they're in. And he does this. I mean, he's in prison for these are 14 years, 14 more years, almost 30 years. He finally gets the legal aid of Brian Stevenson, who is an advocate for unjustly imprisoned, who goes up to the Supreme Court, and he is found innocent of all charges. And he walks out of the cell, walks outside, and he says to family and friends, "The sun does shine." And that became 4 years later. He's written a book called The Sun Does Shine, which became a New York Times best-selling book. His life, which was in diminuendo, has switched into crescendo the moment his circle of influence opened and he consciously realized, I have to choose. I don't have a lot of choices, but what I have, I'm going to choose to be abundant and to be my own with my own values. Now he is a advocate for those justly imprisoned. He's a speaker. He's an author. His life is exploding in crescendo, and he helps Brian Stevenson in Equal Justice Initiative. It's my most inspiring setback story, or one of them, because he identifies, I have to consciously choose how I'm going to respond to this horrible thing that happened to me.
And it's just an amazing story. And it's such an amazing story because you can feel it inside that, that it's like Nelson Mandela, he gets locked away for years and years and years, and no one would blame him for shutting down and just being like, wanting to retaliate and be angry and whatnot. And instead he used this opportunity to make life better for so many other people. And it's such an inspiring story. I love it.
Mandela comes out at 71. He's released, and you think, okay, 71, it's too bad. Prison took almost 28 years of his life. His life's over. Who would know that 4 years later, he's dismantled apartheid. He's the president, the first Black president of South Africa, with William de Klerk, who was the president, as his vice president. And the influence, because his circle of influence expanded, he came into Robben Island as an angry, vengeful man, and he goes out a man that is willing to forgive and to hear the other side and reconcile between the disparity of the blacks and whites. And he wins the hearts of everyone, and his influence is felt throughout the world. He changed history. It's an incredible story too. There's crescendo stories everywhere.
Everywhere you look, wherever you decide to look, it's there.
Yeah.
So for someone who's watching and wondering how to recreate their life, the most powerful tools to heal and enjoy life are gratitude and forgiveness. Why do you see these as the most powerful tools to recreate your life?
Ray Hinton said, they took my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, but what they couldn't take was my joy. He had to forgive, and so did Mandela. Mandela said, if I kept the same hatred and feelings in my heart and I didn't forgive, I would still be in prison right now. And so forgiveness, sometimes we are wronged. Sometimes, there's awful things that happen that we don't have control over. If we don't have forgiveness, we are in prison. It's poison to your spirit and soul. It takes you over. You're in chains. And so we've all heard stories of people who forgive someone who kills their child or does some terrible act. I'm thinking of Elizabeth Smart. I think I got that right after Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped at 14 and abused by a awful, evil man for 9 months, and is finally, found and is free. And so what are her choices? You think, she's 15 now, and she's been raped, she's been abused, she's had this most horrible thing happen. You've got to decide: is she going to let it define her? Is it going to let her destroy her, or strengthen her? and anger, and what you said, forgiveness, and what was the other one? Forgiveness.
Yeah. It was forgiveness
Gratitude,
and gratitude.
and forgiveness.
Yep.
She said, this is incredible that she could say this, and it's a long story, but you can read about it in the book. But it says about about the gratitude. She said, she basically said nobody would wish this on anyone, but she said, I'm grateful for what I went through, because I wouldn't have cared about other people that suffered like this if I hadn't have gone through it. I wouldn't have cared enough to get involved. And so she says, I am grateful for the tiny glimpses of hope, the rays of hope I had during my captivity. And because of that, I cared enough. Now she's married. She graduated from college. She has 3 beautiful children. She started a foundation. She saved lives. She saved, hundreds of lives of children that were kidnapped, and helped them to say, okay, this horrible thing happened to you, but that's not you. That doesn't define you. You have great things. When we talk about your greatest work is ahead of you, Elizabeth Smart's greatest work is still happening, as she's an advocate for her Smart Foundation. And so gratitude and forgiveness, they're the keys that unlock setbacks. And so you're not shackled to them and defined by them the rest of your life.
Yeah. And Cynthia, what I love about that too, is that I know sometimes people are like, they feel like, well, but my time has passed. You use the Nelson Mandela example as like someone who's in their mid 70s coming out of prison and then starting their whole life at that moment in time, they losing 26 years. I love the example you use in your book that essentially some desert cactus flowers can take between 45 and 55 years for their very first flower. And then you tied it to setbacks and adversity, saying challenges and setbacks often seem to have nothing to offer but pain and heartache. But hang on, and after time, valuable and useful lessons emerge. What is it about being patient and persistent that matters most when it comes to setbacks and adversity?
You have to, if you haven't had a big setback in your life, you just haven't lived long enough. Everyone's going to have one. And they're our hardest thing, a death, a disease that we get, bad health, an accident, or being wronged by someone, unjustly imprisoned or convicted or whatever. These are such hard things, but the patience, I don't know, it's easy to say, well, just be patient and you'll see the beauty of it. You kind of can't see it when you're in the rough and you're in prison or you're struggling, but it's like the bamboo tree too. It's everything, all the energy, the first 5 years goes into the root system. Nothing happens. And then the next, the 6th year, it grows 50 feet because the foundation has been set. The same with the cactus that I went down to St. George, Utah, and saw these beautiful cactus. And I've been to Arizona, and they're the flowers that come from cactus are fantastic. They call them Mother Nature's fireworks, but yet the outside is an ugly, prickly, not attractive outside, but then it emerges in these beautiful flowers. And so if we can have some perspective and think, okay, this awful thing, I just got divorced, I lost my job, I've been diagnosed with cancer, my child is ill, I have these things that happen. I can't control all that, but what I can control is how I respond to it, and then I can see through what I've learned, how much it can bless me and my life. Helen Keller said, I thank God for my handicaps, for through them I found myself, my work, and my God. And another one by Golda Meir, who is the prime minister in Israel, said, the beautiful girl has a beautiful girl, let's see, I can't think exactly how it said it, something, not being beautiful was a blessing to me, because I had to develop other strengths. The beautiful girl has a handicap. And so because she didn't have beauty, and that's what was valued, it forced her to become educated, to use her mind. And she's calling the beautiful girl has a handicap because life seems great for her and she has no obstacles. So often obstacles are just the gateway to if we can see it like that and use them instead of let it define and destroy us, if we can use it to strengthen us, what a blessing it later is in our lives and can be to others. Michael J. Fox, if I could tell you what, Michael J. Fox is an example. Think of being diagnosed in the height of your career, Back to the Future guy, but he was so great, such a fun actor and great personality. And in his 20s, he's told he has Parkinson's, and it's the same year that his father died. And he said, my life was skidding out of control. He said, at first I drank myself into oblivion, and that didn't help. And then I realized the only choice I don't have is that I can't choose if I have Parkinson's or not. The rest of it is up to me. So he takes this enormous setback, and look how his life has exploded and expanded in Crescendo, his circle of influence, through becoming the face of Parkinson's. He went before a Senate committee hearing without having any medication, so that the members of Congress could see what it's like physically to shake and move without this medication that they were asking the government to help pay for people who couldn't pay. And he had the courage to do that so that they could see, oh my gosh, this is the reality of it. And here he's a famous actor. And then he ultimately has raised $1 billion, $1 billion for Parkinson's, and has brought the disease out in the open. And he's still living in Crescendo with this great cause he's doing.
You've given us so many really great stories. There's one more that I really want to make sure we include today. And it's one of your dad's favorite movies, The Magnificent Obsession.
Yeah.
Right? And this was a great story about giving anonymously. The main character gave with two conditions. The receiver could never tell anyone, and they could never pay him back. What do you see as the power of anonymous giving?
Anonymous giving it gives such meaning to the giver. Nobody knows, and you're not in it for the accolades, and you're not in it for yourself at all. If you've ever done something secretly for someone quietly, haven't you felt such? It's like at Christmas when you're more excited about what you're going to give somebody than what you're going to get back. And to give anonymously, how it shows in this movie, that it's an old classic with Rock Hudson, and it's really a powerful message. He said, once you start this, it will become an obsession, but it will be a magnificent obsession. And the obsession is that you're not going to expect anything back. The reward is in the intrinsic giving and the joy that it brings your life through doing something for someone who either doesn't know or can't pay you back. And what that does to your character and inside of you is enormous, as well as, serving all those people. That's happened to me. People will come up and tell me things about my father and my mother, who passed away just 2 years ago before COVID. She passed away. And I'll meet people in somewhere, and they will say, your mother, when I lived by her, I was having an unexpected pregnancy, and she bought me some clothes, or she bought me a crib, or she did this and that, but she told me not to tell anyone. It was just between us. And she told it after she passed. And I just thought what joy that brought my mother, and what that did for that person who didn't do it like, oh, here's this big present and everyone can see it. And it's really, anonymous giving is really a joyful act, and it pays in so many ways in your life.
I love that. I absolutely love that. As we begin to wrap up our time together, I'd love to double down on purpose. Richard Leder, the author of The Power of Purpose, explains the vital importance of purpose. He said that purpose is fundamental. It's not a luxury. It's essential for our health, our happiness, our healing, and our longevity. Every human being wants to make a dent in one way or another. Our generation is living longer than any generation before. We're retiring differently than our parents did. Every day we wake up as a new opportunity to create the good life. Why was this an important insight to include in the context of living in Crescendo?
It kind of goes back to that mission statement idea. The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. We need purpose to get up every day. People that don't have that, they don't have any sort of reason to get up, they die sooner. I told an example in the book about the Seville retirement center. These are women. I went to this place and observed and interviewed women in their 70s, 80s, 90s who were, you couldn't believe what they accomplished. They were busy. They get up at 9 o'clock in the morning most days and sew and cut pieces, fabrics. They were making dresses and little cloth balls and all these things and blankets for a humanitarian center. They donate like $1,500 a year. Wow. The woman that was over them called it the life-saving room, said they have purpose because they want a couple of people working on something said, I imagine a little girl playing with this ball who doesn't have a toy, a cloth ball in this underprivileged country, and imagining the joy it brings. He said, I think of this dress and that I'm making. And so they had purpose in their life. The director said, those that don't go in and participate, they sit in their rooms and they will die. And so everyone needs a purpose in life. Sometimes you think, well, I can't do much. How can I make a difference? I don't have a lot of money. I don't have particular skills. You know, you have exactly what it takes to meet someone else's need if you're perceptive and just look around and act. You know, you can all see something, a need that we need to help with in our community, maybe in our family. Maybe you look no further than your child or your grandchild that has a drug addiction or that's struggling in school and failing, doesn't want to go, is sloughing school and going down the wrong road, and you can see it. What a mission in life to take that on, to say, I'm going to mentor this kid. This isn't going to happen on my watch. I'm going to, you know, shadow them. And I think of one father who took a year off of his son was so into drugs that he couldn't leave him alone. He's 14 years old and he was self-destructing. He was living in diminuendo. The father took a year off from work. He took his sabbatical leave and he just to be with his son 24/7, mostly to save his life. And the son's one obsession was baseball. And so they decided to visit all the major baseball arenas around the state, around the country, as well as some other things they were doing. And they spent time together, and the father nurtured the relationship. And while they're driving and while they're going to him, he's mentoring, he's teaching, he's modeling. And then when they were finished, some friend said to the father, wow, you went to like 24 stadiums or something. Do you like baseball that much? And he said, no, but I like my son that much. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, he saved his life. You know, it was what a mission that was no further than his own home. So find your own unique mission and cultivate it and bless the lives of others, and it will come back into your own.
Such great wisdom. Oh, I love it. And finally, I'd love to end with some wisdom you included from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning after surviving the Nazi death camps. Rather than asking, what is it I want from life? He suggests asking a different question. What does life want from me? I found that to be a profoundly I found that to be a deeply profound, I can't even speak today. I'm still, all of your stories are sort of like my head. So I found this to be a very deeply profound question. Why did you choose to include it in the book? Asking why, what does life want from me?
It's the same thing we're talking about, the same idea. What's your mission? What is life requiring of me? What special gifts and skills do I have to offer? And you know, you have enough. You don't need to be smarter and more talented and have more money. You know, when you're older, particularly, if you did choose, my father said, you may choose to retire from a job, but never choose to retire from making meaningful contributions. When you're older, you've got more time, more wisdom, even more money, more skills to offer than anyone. And so Viktor Frankl's idea that what is life asking of me is a good question. Instead of, it's kind of the John Kennedy, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Mm-hmm. So what can I offer this world, this community, my neighborhood, my family? What can I give? And Dr. Frankl was one of the people that my father really admired and talked about. And he had an opportunity to speak with him a few times on the phone before he passed away. And it was amazing that Frankl, talking about purpose that you were talking about earlier, Frankl said, we couldn't figure out, we were trying to analyze, as he was a psychologist, who would die and who would survive. And the main factor we came back to is those who had a purpose to live, who had a why, like the Russian philosopher, those who have a why to live can deal with any how. And those that had a why, one person's why was that he was a scientist and he had done a lot of work on a particular project when he was in prison. He was in the middle of a discovery and he wanted to finish that. He had a link that would cause, scientific breakthroughs. He lived to finish that project. That was his most important role, his contribution to get to live through the Nazi death camp, to get back and finish that. Another one, it was a child that was in another country that he knew needed him, and that was his purpose. Those that didn't have a purpose to get up every day, they died early. That's what they found out. And so back to your idea of what is life asking of me. My challenge would be listen to your conscience, be still inside yourself and think, what is life asking of me in my most important roles, in my family, in my neighborhood, in my community, in my business, in my work, and thinking that life is a mission, not a career. How can I contribute and grow and crescendo, no matter the age or stage? If I'm 20, if I'm 95, your most important work is still ahead of you to discover. And that's what's exciting about getting up every day. What are you going to do? What are you going to contribute? And I'd leave that challenge with our listeners.
Cynthia, it's such a pleasure and honor to speak with you today. I'm really, really excited. I want everyone to go out there and get your book, Live Life in Crescendo. Your most important work is ahead of you. This is such a great book. I love it so much. The stories you've shared today are just a beginning of examples of what's contained in here. I know it's on sale on September 27th, right? So I'm excited for the people participating today to be able to go out there and get that and take it on for themselves. It's such an important piece of work.
Thanks so much, Bill. You had such great questions. You kind of, you were understanding this material, and it's just such important things to communicate, I think. And this was my dad's desire to spread this, and you're an instrument doing that. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much. I'll tell you, my life was profoundly changed by your father. It was something that at a very early age, I took on the 7 habits of highly effective people and saw them as principles for life and living life the best way I could. And then the 8th principle with finding my voice and helping others do the same, all of that stuff just really, really lifted me up. So when I saw this opportunity to support his last book, I'm like, yes, I would love to be able to do it. So it is really an honor and a privilege to be with you today, Cynthia.
This is your mission, Bill. What you're doing, expanding this and bringing great ideas and all these guests to everyone. So I congratulate you for fulfilling your mission.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Thanks for having me on. Sure appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.